Pandemic nightmares, Twitter scandals, and the master plan to end all plans? Where's Phase 4 of the MCU headed? Depends on which universe you're in. Kevin Feige has never made it a secret that he likes to plan out projects in the MCU far in advance. Back in August 2013, he revealed that he had already been discussing films in the franchise that would release as late as 2021. The following year, he announced that Marvel had plans for motion pictures laid out through 2028. In a 2016 interview with Collider, Feige confirmed that Marvel Studios had specific movies in mind that it wanted to release on a handful of 2020 release dates. Even then, he seemed to know just how Phase 4 would pan out. Feige has also been open about the fact that sometimes these plans do change, such as the studios team up with Sony to produce the Spider-Man movies. But there are still always ambitions in place for what the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe will look like. Rome wasn't built in a day, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe was not formed overnight. Speaking to Rotten Tomatoes in June 2021, just as Black Widow was about to premiere in theaters, Kevin Feige said that the prep work for Phase 4 had largely been done over a 5 or 6 year period. However, he also pointed out that other characters in this stretch of the MCU had been gestating for much longer than that. Specifically, he noted that the character of Shang-Chi had been worked on in some way, shape, or form for 10 or 15 years. That's not just PR hype from Feige either. Back in 2005, the Los Angeles Times reported on the creation of Marvel Studios and its intent to produce self-financed movies. It also revealed that one of the characters eyeballed for a solo movie was Shang-Chi.
Welcome to the circus.
Of course, this finally came to pass in 2021 with Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. The lengthy amount of time it took for Shang-Chi to reach movie theaters isn't the norm for all Marvel Cinematic Universe projects, but it does reflect how long it took certain Phase 4 projects to come about. In April 2017, Kevin Feige explained that plans were already well underway for the follow-up to the MCU's third phase. Though he was vague on the specifics at the time, he did note that there were notions that the term phase might be abandoned altogether. A staple of the Marvel Cinematic Universe since its inception, Feige explained to Collider that what followed Phase 3 would be a new thing. Part of that meant finding a new term to refer to a collection of Marvel Cinematic Universe titles, or even abandoning the practice of grouping together various installments in the franchise. In retrospect, it's easy to see why Feige would harbor such feelings, given how Avengers Endgame, the penultimate entry in Phase 3, was such a gargantuan game-changer for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It would only make sense that he would want to utilize new terminology for how the various features are organized. However, this potential move never came to pass, with Kevin Feige officially disclosing details about Phase 4 at the San Diego International Comic-Con in July 2019. After the many delays brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe began with Black Widow in July 2021. However, in an alternate timeline, Phase 4 would have kicked off with a very different feature.
Welcome to the frickin' Guardians of the Galaxy.
Initially, the first post-Phase 3 entry in the saga would have been Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which was penciled in for a May 2020 opening. The 3-year gap between Volume 3 and its predecessor would have nicely mirrored the length of time between the first two Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Having Phase 4 kick off with a buzzy sequel like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 would also have proved hugely beneficial to the franchise. However, those plans were scuttled in July 2018 when James Gunn was fired from the movie after controversy erupted over the filmmaker's past controversial tweets. With Gunn gone, there were initially reports that Marvel Studios still planned to move forward with Volume 3 and get it out in time for a May 2020 debut. However, Gunn would eventually be welcomed back to the project, though his commitments to the Suicide Squad ensured Volume 3 would have to wait until May 2023. This opened the door for Black Widow to take over as the debut Phase 4 film. As Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 hit movie theaters, writer-director James Gunn confirmed his intent to make a third installment in the sci-fi series. While Gunn reaffirmed even back in 2017 that this would be the final Guardians film he would write and direct, he did note that his influence might be felt in the Marvel Cinematic Universe beyond that franchise. Speaking on Facebook Live, Gunn revealed that he would be helping to mold the vision for the cosmic side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe for years to come. Referring to Volume 3, he said,
"It will help to set up the next 10, 20 years of Marvel movies."
Gunn did not specify what kind of Phase 4 projects he could be involved in, though this potential influence got sidetracked once he was temporarily fired from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Gunn's focus on the DCEU kept him busy in the years before he started shooting the third Guardians chapter. Though Gunn has yet to follow up on whether or not he was able to exert his influence on the cosmic adventures of Phase 4, it doesn't seem particularly likely, especially considering his busy schedule outside of the MCU. Years before Kevin Feige and the Marvel Studios brass officially confirmed what projects would make up Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the rumor mill attempted to fill in the gaps. But it wasn't until 2018 that a new concept of Marvel Cinematic Universe storytelling emerged. This was when Variety broke the news that Marvel Studios was developing a collection of TV shows for the then upcoming Disney Plus streaming platform. The outlet revealed that the small-screen endeavors would focus on characters such as Loki and Wanda Maximoff, who hadn't yet received their own solo big-screen outings. This news was important for a variety of reasons, but especially because it revealed that Marvel Studios was, for the first time, planning on moving into the world of television. Up to this point, small-screen programming that utilized characters from MCU movies had been made by the studio's sister division, Marvel Television. But with this new wrinkle in Phase 4, Marvel Studios would be expanding its narrative horizons. In the process, this early rumor guaranteed that Phase 4 was going to be unlike any other phase in the MCU to date. Phase 4's exploration of the world of television goes far beyond the miniseries, however, as the MCU is also delivering certain stories as holiday TV specials. Once the domain of Rankin Bass programming like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Marvel Studios is hoping to tell grander tales that can also double as festive entertainment tied to the biggest holidays of the year. The first of these projects was announced in December 2020, the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. A longtime passion project for James Gunn, the production was confirmed by Gunn to act as a kind of prologue to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. With this reveal, it became clear that these holiday specials weren't disposable goofs, but essential parts of the Phase 4 narrative. This isn't the only holiday special on the docket for Phase 4 either, as an untitled Halloween special directed by Michael Giacchino is also on the way, rumored to be based on the character Werewolf by Night. With these two projects, Phase 4 has continued to reshape the way in which the MCU can tell stories, on both the big and small screen. When Kevin Feige first publicly spoke about the prospect of Marvel Studios making original programming for the Disney Plus platform, he was very insistent that these shows would not be removed from the continuity of this franchise's movies. Back in February 2019, Feige told comicbook.com that these Disney Plus programs would be, quote, entirely interwoven within the theatrical slate of Phase 4 MCU releases. This was in sharp contrast to how previous TV shows based on Marvel characters had tended to function. By and large, they had been mostly separate from the feature-length narratives in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In Phase 4, the franchise has managed to live up to Feige's words. WandaVision set the stage for Wanda Maximoff's villainous behavior in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, while Ms. Marvel sets up its titular superhero so that she can serve as one of the leads of the 2023 project The Marvels. Black Widow's Yelena Belova showed up in a guest star capacity on Hawkeye, and it's fair to assume that the Falcon and the Winter Soldier planted seeds that would one day be sowed in Thunderbolts. Perhaps most importantly, Jonathan Majors debuted as a version of Kang the Conqueror on Loki, before stepping into a much larger role in movies such as Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and Avengers: The Kang Dynasty. It's clear that Feige's mission to narrow the gap between big and small screen storytelling has very much come to pass. Looking back on the Phase 4 movies announced at the San Diego International Comic-Con panel in 2019, you can immediately spot a few recognizable titles. Projects such as Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness and Thor: Love and Thunder were among the most exciting to be announced at the event. But one Phase 4 film notable for its absence was Spider-Man: No Way Home. This was despite Spider-Man: Far From Home opening a few weeks before the panel and going on to crack $1.1 billion worldwide. It would later turn out that its absence was no mistake, as Sony and Marvel were in the middle of negotiations at the time over the future of Spider-Man. This would eventually result in the two companies parting ways in August 2019, with Sony planning to continue the exploits of Tom Holland's Spider-Man in their own movies. Eventually, an agreement was signed that reunited the two companies to produce another solo Spider-Man movie, resulting in Spider-Man: No Way Home. In the first three phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it was difficult to figure out how the franchise connected to the broader franchise of Netflix characters such as Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist. While these shows would often reference MCU events or characters, the movies never returned the gesture. Once the Marvel/Netflix shows were axed in late 2018 and early 2019, it seemed like this chapter of Marvel storytelling had come to a close. But then came the absorption of Marvel Television into Marvel Studios. The two entities had previously been wholly separate, complicating any potential crossovers between their projects. However, now that they were under the same umbrella, small-screen Marvel projects could be more easily ingrained into the wider MCU. An especially exciting example of this took place in Spider-Man: No Way Home, in which Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock makes a cameo appearance. It was the first time a Netflix character had appeared in an MCU movie, but it wouldn't be the last. Vincent D'Onofrio appeared as Kingpin in Hawkeye. Cox returned for She-Hulk, and in 2022, Marvel announced Daredevil: Born Again, a Disney Plus series slated for release in 2024. To bring to life some of its Disney Plus programming, the various branches of the Walt Disney Company have turned to turning screenplays for unproduced movies into longer limited series. The most high-profile example of this so far has been Obi-Wan Kenobi, which utilized enough key plot points and characters from a planned movie to give that feature's screenwriter a full credit on the project.
Hello there.
A lesser-known example of this trend can be found in one of the Phase 4 TV shows, Hawkeye. Apparently, Hawkeye was still a movie back when Jeremy Renner first signed on, but it would later morph into one of the first Disney Plus shows created by Marvel Studios. The studio's ability to transform a perspective movie into a TV show with such ease demonstrates that with its small screen projects, Marvel has mostly been looking to make elongated movies rather than traditional episodic TV shows. It also reflects the ambitions of Disney as a streaming empire, one that won't let any feature film script go to waste. It's difficult to imagine that only one aspect of Phase 4's narrative was affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. After all, there are so many movies and TV shows to juggle in this saga, and so many characters and intertwining storylines in all of those individual productions that surely a lot must have changed, right? Well, apparently not. Speaking to On the Red Carpet, Feige claimed that only one significant change had occurred in response to the pandemic. For Feige, the shadowy benefactor Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine was supposed to make her MCU debut in Black Widow, in which she appears in the post-credits scene. Instead, she turned up in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier due to the shifting timeline that occurred as a result of COVID-19. While it's doubtful that this was the only change to Phase 4's story informed by the pandemic, it is the only alteration that Feige has so far been willing to speak about. Throughout the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, movie studios use streaming services to debut movies that never before would have been considered for small-screen premieres. Would new Pixar titles ever have been thought of as fodder for straight-to-streaming debuts? Similarly, would a mammoth blockbuster like Dune ever have been given a simultaneous HBO Max launch in any other era? The global health crisis inspired unprecedented action from almost every industry on the planet, so it should be no surprise that the entertainment industry followed suit.
Well, in 120 years of movies being in our cinemas, we've never had to shut down like this before.
Talking to Rotten Tomatoes, Kevin Feige explained that, even knowing how the pandemic had affected movie theaters, the feature-length efforts from Marvel Studios were never considered for streaming. In the same interview, Feige recalled how his favorite experiences with these movies involved watching them on the big screen, surrounded by enthusiastic audiences. Considering that, Feige noted that he had remained dedicated to keeping the movies in Phase 4 as theatrical events. Only one film, Black Widow, had a dual release, both in theaters and on Disney+. While the MCU has a reputation for maintaining a long-standing and reliable plan for its productions, the franchise has often been forced to delay projects under certain circumstances. The Avengers was originally set to debut in July 2011, for instance, before being delayed to May 2012. Similarly, Doctor Strange was postponed by 4 months from its initial July 2016 bout to ensure that Benedict Cumberbatch could play the titular superhero. However, Phase 4 of the MCU took the cake in terms of release date shuffles, largely thanks to the ongoing effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Some films in Phase 4 moved around more often than others due to the pandemic. Thor: Love and Thunder was especially vulnerable to release date tweaks. Initially set for a November 2021 premiere when it was first announced in July 2019, Love and Thunder would eventually be delayed multiple times, including briefly scoring a Valentine's Day weekend opening, before settling on a July 2022 launch date. Other projects such as Black Widow and Eternals also received a year or more's worth of delays due to the pandemic. For obvious reasons, 2021 was something of an odd year for the theatrical box office. Features came roaring back to movie theaters, and many managed to do solid box office numbers. However, with COVID-19 vaccines still making their way across the general populace, people felt varying degrees of comfort with going to the movies. This and plenty of other factors doubtlessly impacted the worldwide box office returns for the first 3 installments in Phase 4. This trio of projects scored the lowest worldwide box office hauls for any Marvel Cinematic Universe project outside of The Incredible Hulk, with Black Widow being only the second project in the series to make under $400 million globally. However, there is some context needed to better understand these grosses. For starters, Black Widow was given a simultaneous premium video-on-demand debut on Disney+, which doubtlessly cut into its grosses. Even more importantly, none of these movies were released in China. Every Marvel Studios project released in this territory from 2017 to 2019 exceeded $100 million, with all 3 of the company's 2019 productions grossing over $150 million in China alone. A standard theatrical box office haul in China would have boosted all 3 movies past the $500 million worldwide mark. Still, all 3 found some form of box office success, and particularly Shang-Chi, which was briefly the biggest domestic movie of 2021, before Spider-Man: No Way Home returned the franchise to its former box office glory.
I love you guys. Thank you.
For Phase 4 of the MCU, Marvel Studios has tried to forge even deeper bonds than usual with some of its most important talent. This is in sharp contrast to the previous eras in the company's history. Save for a 3-year contract in 2012 keeping Joss Whedon around to work on assorted projects, Marvel Studios hasn't kept filmmakers under long-term contractual obligations. This has made it extra easy for directors like Scott Derrickson and John Watts to leave prospective gigs without having to navigate how it might impact their contractual obligations to the studio. But that has changed with Phase 4, with Ryan Coogler being the most notable example of a director who opted to sign on for the long haul. As part of his overall contract with Disney, Coogler was on the hook to oversee a new Disney Plus Marvel show set in Wakanda. At the end of 2021, it was announced that Shang-Chi director Destin Daniel Cretton would be helming a sequel to that movie, and it soon became clear that he had also signed a long-term contract with Marvel Studios. Sure enough, in 2022, it was reported that he would be directing Avengers: The Kang Dynasty and overseeing a Wonder Man series for Disney+. For Phase 4 and beyond, it seems that Marvel Studios wants to keep a tight hold of its most talented artists.